Help! Somebody help him!
Get him on the table. We need to act now. Hold him still.
Please, don't let him die.
Tell me what happened. Easy, big guy. We are going to take care of you. I need a pulse. Get me the kit.
You must save him.
I'm doing all I can.
Every fancy clinic in the city had told the most dangerous man alive that his dog was just old and it was time to let go. And then he carried that dog through my door at 11 at night. The discount vet, the fat one they'd sent him to as a joke. And I was the only one who actually looked. Let me set it for you. Bell Veterinary, my clinic, 1 room and a back surgery, and a waiting area with mismatched chairs, on a corner where people bring me animals they love and can't afford to fix anywhere else. It was 11 at night. I was mopping up after a long day, and the door banged open, and a man filled the whole frame of it with a huge old shepherd dog, cradled in his arms like a child, and I knew him. Everyone knew him. Don Ronaldo Catena, the man the city said your name carefully around. And he stood in my shabby little waiting room with this dying dog in his arms and said, in a voice I'd never have imagined coming out of a man like that, "Everyone says he's done. Please, they sent me to you. Please look at him. The dog was bad. I'll tell you that honestly. He was old, 15 if he was a day, and he was limp and grey-muzzled and barely lifting his head, and every instinct in the room was screaming what the 4 clinics before me had apparently already said. It's time. He's old. Let him go. I'd heard the story in 30 seconds. The Don had taken this dog to the best, most expensive veterinary hospitals in the city, the ones with the marble floors and the specialists, and every one of them had run the same surface tests and shrugged and said the kindest version of "put him down." And the last one had said it with a sneer and told him if he insisted on wasting more money, there was a discount vet down on Bell Street who'd take anyone's animal. Me, the fat vet on the cheap corner, the insult they sent him to, and he'd come. Because the most feared man in the city was not ready to let this dog go, and he'd swallowed the insult and carried his dog to the joke clinic, because a joke clinic was the only door left. So I did the thing the marble floor clinics hadn't bothered to do. I looked. Really looked. Not at a 15-year-old dog they'd already decided was dying. At this dog, this set of symptoms, with fresh eyes and no conclusion already written. And within 20 minutes, my heart started going, because it wasn't adding up to old age. The collapse, the weakness, the gut trouble, the way his electrolytes had to be sitting if I was reading him right, that wasn't a body wearing out. That was a specific pattern, a treatable one, the kind they call the Great Pretender, because it mimics a dozen fatal things and fools anyone who doesn't run the one test to catch it. A test that costs $40. A test not one marble clinic had run, because they'd taken one look at an old dog and I'll say it, at the kind of client they assumed, and decided the answer before they asked the question. I ran it that night, and I turned around to the most dangerous man in the city, who was sitting on my waiting room floor with his dog's head in his lap, and I said, "Don Catena, your dog is not dying of old age. He has a disease, a real one, with a name, and it's been hiding behind his age, and every place you took him missed it, because they didn't look. And here's the thing. I crouched down to his level, the way you do with the people whose whole world is on your table. It's treatable. It's manageable. With the right medication, he doesn't have days. He could have years. I can save him." And the man the whole city was afraid of put his face down into his old dog's fur and made a sound I will never forget. Not a hard man's sound at all, and I didn't understand yet why a dog meant that much to a man like that. I would. But first you have to understand who I am, and why 4 better-funded vets missed what the discount vet caught. My name is Frankie Bell, Dr. Francis Bell, if we're being formal. which I mostly am not. I'm 37 years old. I'm a big woman, and I am a very good veterinarian running a clinic the rest of my profession looks down on. Bell Veterinary is small, and it is poor, and it is mine. I treat the animals of a neighborhood that loves them and can't always pay for them, which means I've taken payment in tamales and snow shoveling and IOUs that'll never come, and I've eaten the cost of more surgeries than I can count because the alternative was letting a family's dog die over money. It is not a glamorous practice. The big referral hospitals across town, with their specialists and their marble and their financing plans, regard a clinic like mine the way a steakhouse regards a taco truck. Beneath comment, a little embarrassing, the place you joke about sending people. And they make their jokes, and some of them are about the practice, and some of them are about me, the discount vet. I've heard a specialist say it to a client's face, like it was my name. And underneath it, always, the other thing. The thing big women in skilled professions learn to hear in the pause before someone decides whether to trust us. The flick of the eyes. The surprise that the competent voice on the phone belongs to that. The assumption that a woman shaped like me must have ended up at a discount clinic because she couldn't cut it anywhere finer. The vet who sent Don Catena to me did it as a double insult, to a client he wanted rid of, and to the colleague he thought least of. Take your hopeless old dog to the fat girl on Bell Street. He meant it to be the end of the road. But here's what the marble clinics never understood, and it's the whole of why I caught what they missed. I am at a poor clinic on purpose. I trained well, better than they assume, and I could have chased the prestige track, the referral hospital, the financing plans. I didn't want it, because somewhere in my training, I watched too many beloved animals get written off fast. Old, not worth the workup. The family can't pay anyway. Next. And I decided I'd rather be the vet who looks, who runs the cheap test, who treats the 15-year-old mutt like he's worth a real diagnosis, because to the person holding his leash, he is the whole world. My gift isn't that I'm smarter than the specialists. It's that I don't decide the answer before I ask the question. I don't look at an old dog, or a poor client, or, and I know this one in my bones, a big woman, and let the assumption do the diagnosing. I can even tell you the day I decided. I was a student, on a rotation at one of those gleaming hospitals, and an old man brought in a cat. Ancient, scruffy, clearly his whole company in the world, and the supervising vet glanced at it for 10 seconds, said, "Renal failure, it's old. Kindest thing is to let it go," and moved on to a paying client. And I stayed, because the old man was crying, and I looked, and it wasn't renal failure. It was a blocked, fixable thing, and I flagged it, and that cat lived 3 more years, and the supervisor was annoyed at me for the trouble of it. That was the day. I understood that the gleaming places aren't better at caring, they're just better at billing, and that there was a whole world of beloved animals being written off fast by people too important to look twice. I decided I'd rather be the one who looks. I have never once regretted it, including the night it walked through my door wearing the face of the most dangerous man in the city. I just never thought that stubbornness would put me face to face with the most dangerous man in the city, weeping on my floor. I thought it was a quiet principle I kept for the animals nobody else would fight for. I didn't know it was about to save the one thing keeping a frozen man alive. Don Rinaldo Catena. I knew the city's version before he ever came through my door, the way everyone did. The name you didn't say too loud, the man whose business you didn't ask about. A stillness that made rooms go careful. 50s, broad, gray, a face that had closed itself a long time ago. That was the Ronaldo the world had. The Ronaldo I got in pieces over the nights of treating his dog and the first piece broke my heart and rearranged the whole story. Because I asked, the way you ask, making conversation over an IV line at 2 in the morning. How long have you had him? What's his name? And the most feared man in the city was quiet, a long moment, and then he said, his name is Biscuit. And I must have smiled, because a 15-year-old shepherd belonging to a Mafia don is not usually named Biscuit. And he saw the smile, and something in his closed face opened a crack, and he said, my son named him. Daniele. Danny. He was 2. He couldn't say the breed. He just kept pointing and saying, Biscuit, Biscuit, so. A breath. Danny picked him out of a litter, smallest one, said he wanted the one nobody else would pick. And then he told me, in the flat voice men use for the wound that never closed, that Danny had died. 13 years ago, an illness, fast and merciless. A little boy of 12, and there had been nothing the best doctors in the world could do, and the man who could fix anything with money or fear had sat helpless and watched his son go. And the dog, Biscuit, the runt Danny picked because nobody else would, had been the boy's shadow for those 12 years, had slept on his bed, had been lying against him at the end. He's the last thing that knew my son, Ronaldo said, to me, a stranger, on my waiting room floor. When he's gone, there's no one left who, and he didn't finish it. He didn't have to, so now you understand. It was never about a dog. The most dangerous man in the city had lost his only child 13 years ago and had been keeping the boy's dog alive ever since, because that old gray animal was the last living warmth that had ever touched his son, the last creature on earth that remembered Danny existed. And 4 clinics full of competent people had looked at an old dog and a rich, scary man and run the easy tests and told him to let go, never once knowing they were telling him to bury his son a second time. And the last one had sneered and sent him to me to be rid of him. I have thought a great deal since about how close it came, about how a man's last piece of his child nearly died of a $40 test. Nobody thought he was worth running. And somewhere in those nights, the IV lines, the 2 a.m. quiet, the sight of that closed, terrifying face, gone soft and desperate over a sleeping dog, I made the mistake I always swear I won't make. I let myself see the man, instead of the legend, and I let myself care. Not just for Biscuit, for the frozen man thawing in my waiting room, who said please to a discount vet, who'd carried his grief for 13 years inside a body the city feared. I knew what he was. I'm not a fool about it. But the heart doesn't run a background check before it softens toward a man weeping into his dead son's dog. I never said it. A woman like me, a man like that. It wasn't a fantasy. It was a thing I refused to say even to myself. What I didn't know was that my caring, and his, had been noticed, and that not everyone was glad the discount vet had become the most important person in Don Ronaldo Catena's narrow, guarded world. Let me tell you exactly what I found, because it wasn't a miracle and I won't let anyone call it luck. It was a workup. The fancy clinics had seen an old dog crashing, weak, vomiting, collapsing, his blood work a mess, and they'd pattern matched it to the thing it looks like, an old body's organs giving out. End of the line, but the pattern bothered me. The specific shape of how his electrolytes sat, the way he'd rallied and crashed and rallied, and I'd seen that shape before, in school, with a name attached, a disease they call the Great Pretender, precisely because it costs lives by impersonating fatal things. So I ran the one specific test that confirms it, a cheap, ordinary test, the test you run if you're willing to consider you don't already know the answer. And there it was, not old age. A treatable endocrine disease, hiding in plain sight behind a grey muzzle, killing a dog everyone had given up on, entirely fixable with the right medication for the rest of his life. He wasn't out of the woods the first night. A body that's sick has to be pulled back carefully. And so there were nights, fluids and monitoring, and the slow, careful correction of a system in crisis. And through all of it, on my waiting room floor, the most feared man in the city, who would not leave. I'd tell him to go home and sleep. He wouldn't. He sat with Biscuit's head in his lap and his back against my mismatched chairs, and he talked. In the low, unguarded way the dark and the fear pull out of people, about Danny, the kind of boy he'd been, the way he'd loved that runt dog, the 13 years of a grief he'd never once said aloud to a living soul. Because who do you say it to when you're him? He said it to me, the discount vet, because I was safe, the way a stranger at 2 a.m. over a sick animal is safe, and because, I think, no one had asked him about his son in 13 years. He showed me a photo on the second night from a cracked old wallet he clearly hadn't opened in a long time. A gap-toothed boy of maybe 8, arms thrown around a half-grown Biscuit, both of them mid-laugh, the dog nearly bowling the kid over. He'd be 25 now, Ronaldo said, in the flat voice of a man doing math he does every single day. I think about it, what he'd be, and I didn't say any of the useless things people say to the grieving. I just looked at the photo, as long as he held it out. Really looked, the way I look at everything, gave the boy the full attention the world stops giving the dead, and I said, he looks like trouble, the good kind. And Ronaldo laughed, a cracked, rusty sound, like a door that hadn't opened in years. He was, he said. God, he was. I think it might have been the first time in 13 years he'd laughed about his son, instead of only grieving him, over a sick dog, on a discount vet's floor, at 3 in the morning. And then, on the third night, Biscuit lifted his head and ate. I have handed people a lot of good news across that table, and I have never seen anything like the face of Ronaldo Catena watching his dead son's dog eat a bowl of food. The man the city feared put his forehead against that old dog's and wept. Openly, without hiding it, the kind of weeping that's 13 years backed up behind a wall. And then he looked up at me, the discount vet, the fat girl on Bell Street, like I had reached into the grave and handed him back a piece of his child. You looked, he said, wrecked. 4 of them, and you're the only one who looked. And I said the truest thing I know, the thing my whole stubborn career is built on. Everybody's somebody's whole world, Don Catena, even an old dog named Biscuit. Especially an old dog named Biscuit. You don't get to decide they're not worth looking at. And something happened in his face that I think a lot of money and a lot of fear had not managed to do to it in years. It cracked all the way open. I thought, when Biscuit was stable and went home on his pills, that was the end of it. Send the old dog home. Send the frightening man with him. Get back to the tamales and the IOUs. It was not the end of it. Because the most dangerous man in the city started coming back. For checkups, Biscuit didn't strictly need. With questions, he could have phoned. He'd appear at Bell Veterinary in the quiet hour before close, with the dog who was now, thanks to a $40 test, trotting in under his own power, and he'd find reasons to stay, and we'd talk. Not about his world, never about his world, about the dog, and then about Danny, and then, slowly, about everything else. 2 careful people circling something neither of us would name. I want to be fair to him and to you. I knew what he was the whole time. I didn't let the soft father in my waiting room erase the hard man the city feared. Both were true. And I'm not going to pretend the second one away to make a sweeter story. But I'll tell you what I saw, because I saw it up close, in the unguarded hours. A man who had built a fortress out of grief and fear, who had not let one living person in for 13 years, slowly deciding that the discount vet who'd looked at his son's dog when no one else would, was safe to be human in front of. That's a powerful thing, to be the one safe place for a man like that. I knew it was powerful. I also knew, with the part of me that survived being a big woman in a small life, that powerful and safe are not the same thing. Because his world had noticed. A man that guarded, suddenly spending his evenings at a discount vet's, suddenly soft. That gets noticed by the people whose business is noticing. And it got noticed too, across town, by the marble floor vet who'd sent him to me as an insult, and now had to watch the fat girl on Bell Street become something to the most powerful man in the city. Wounded pride is a small, ugly engine, but it runs a long time. Between his suspicious men, who didn't like an unvetted nobody so close to the boss, and a humiliated specialist with a grudge and a seat on the licensing board, the trouble that came for me didn't come with a gun. It came the way trouble comes for women like me, dressed as concern, as procedure, as just asking questions about that clinic's standards. It arrived as a letter, and then a man. The letter was from the veterinary board, a complaint, anonymous but not really, alleging that Bell Veterinary was practicing below standard, mishandling cases, that my license should be reviewed. The kind of complaint that doesn't have to be true to end you. The investigation alone can close a clinic that runs on tamales and goodwill, and close behind it one of Don Catena's own men, a capo named Mauro who'd never liked me, came to my clinic, not quite threatening, just explaining, the way they do. That I'd gotten very close to the Don, that people were uncomfortable, that maybe, with this board trouble and all, it'd be wise for me to put some distance there, encourage the Don to take his dog elsewhere, before the discomfort grew. A woman in your spot, Mauro said, looking around my shabby clinic, doesn't want to be a problem for people like us, or a problem for the board. Be smart. Step back. Both barrels, from both worlds, aimed at the discount vet, who'd done nothing but save a dog. And I stood there, 37 years old, the only one who looked, and understood that the reward for it might be losing the clinic and the license I'd built my whole stubborn life around. I don't know how he heard. I think Biscuit's old vet, across town, the grudge, had bragged about the board complaint to the wrong room, and it got back. But the next evening, Don Rinaldo Catena was in my clinic, and Mauro was there too, because the Don had brought him, and I watched the most feared man in the city do the thing his whole world is built to prevent. Stand up for someone who couldn't do anything for him back. Mauro tells me he had a conversation with you, Rinaldo said to me, quiet, and then he turned to his own man, and the temperature dropped 40 degrees. You went to her clinic, to make her uncomfortable, to make her send away the dog. He let it sit. 4 hospitals told me Biscuit was done. 4, and every man you respect would have told me to let an old dog die. She's the one who looked. She ran a test that cost $40, and she gave me back the last living thing that knew my son, and she did it for a stranger, for nothing, when the rest of this city had written both of us off. His voice never rose. It didn't have to. She stays. She is the only one who didn't give up on him, or on me. Nobody touches her. Not her clinic, not her license. Not a word against her. That board complaint disappears by morning, and whoever filed it learns some manners. And you go to her clinic again, only to apologize. Are we clear? And then, to me, lower, the hard man entirely gone. I'm sorry. My world reached for you because I let it see what you mean to me. That was my fault. It will not happen again. Mara was clear. The bored complaint evaporated within a day, the way troubles do when the most dangerous man in the city decides they should. And by the next week it was understood, in both the worlds that had come at me, that the vet on Bell Street was under Rinaldo Catena's hand and was not to be touched. And it should have been pure relief, and instead it opened that familiar cold door, because I have to be honest about it. I had become visible as his, the Don's vet, the woman who saved Biscuit. Protected, now, untouchable, but because of him, not because of me. And I had spent my whole life choosing the harder, poorer, honest road on purpose, being the vet who looks, who can't be bought, who treats the runt nobody else will, and I did not walk that road for 37 years to suddenly owe my safety and my license to a powerful man's say-so. Being shielded by a Don is not the same as being your own woman, and gratitude, I have learned, is a beautiful thing and a terrible foundation. He came back when it was just us, Biscuit asleep and snoring in the corner, alive, ordinary, a miracle gone boring the way the best miracles do. And he didn't come like a Don, or even like the wrecked father from the floor. He came like a man with a question he was almost afraid of. And he said, I have to ask you something, and I need the true answer, not the safe one. You fought for that dog like he was yours. You let me grieve my son in your waiting room. You did it for nothing, and asked for nothing, and when my world came for you, you still didn't ask me for anything. Everyone in my life wants something from me, Frankie. It is the water I swim in. You never have. Why? And I should have given the safe answer. Instead, I gave the true one. Because you weren't the legend to me, I said. You were a man on my floor, with his dead son's dog, saying please. And nobody in your whole life, I think, has gotten to just be a person with you. They get the fear, or they want the power. I got the father. I got the man who picked the runt because his little boy wanted the one nobody else would. Do you know what it did to me, watching you love that old dog like a piece of your child? It undid me. So I didn't fight for a Don's pet. I fought for a grieving father's last warm link to his son, because that is the most human thing I have ever been let near, and I'd have done it for free if it closed my clinic, and I don't want anything for it. And that's exactly why I can't be what your world made me last week. Your vet. Your protected thing. Your kept woman on Bell Street. I won't be a thing you own, even a thing you love. I've spent my whole life being the one who looks, who can't be bought. I'd rather lose the clinic honestly than keep it as your possession. I have never seen a frozen man so completely thawed. He looked at me like I'd handed him back a second living thing he thought he'd lost. Himself. You think I came to keep you, he said. Like I keep Biscuit safe, behind a wall. A breath. Frankie, for 13 years I have been a closed door, and you are the first person who got inside without wanting the room. I don't want to own you. I want to deserve you, in the daylight, as a man, not as the thing this city is afraid of. You looked at an old dog everyone wrote off, and saw something worth saving. Let me spend a while being a man worth looking at. It would be a lovely place to stop. The frozen man thawed, the overlooked woman finally cherished. But I've run an honest clinic on a poor corner my whole adult life, and I know exactly how fast being cherished by a powerful man becomes being owned by one. Today I'm the miracle who saved Biscuit. What am I in a year? The Don's vet, my clinic quietly bankrolled, my license safe because of who I belong to, Every honest, hard thing I built turned into something he provides. I would not trade an honest, poor practice for a comfortable, kept one. They are not the same road, no matter how nice the kept one looks. So I told him my terms, across the snoring dog between us, because Biscuit was the truth of us. If you mean it, I said, here's how it goes. Bell Veterinary stays mine, and it stays honest. You don't bankroll it. You don't disappear my problems. You don't make my license safe by being scary. If the board ever comes again, I answer it on my own work, because my work is good, and I'd rather stand on it than hide behind you. You bring Biscuit in, like any client, and you pay like any client. You don't decide things for me to keep me safe. You ask, like I'm a woman with a say in her own life. And if you want to deserve me, you come around in the daylight, as the man and not the don, and you court me slow and in the open. And the day you treat me like a thing you own, even a thing you love, the door's shut, and I go back to my tamales and my IOUs, and I'll be fine. Because I was the vet who looks long before you ever carried a dog through my door. He didn't argue. That's how I knew it was real. A man who wanted to own me would have argued, would have promised to build me a marble clinic of my own, to skip the earning. Ronaldo Catena just looked at me a long moment, and then his closed face did the thing it had only done for a dog named Biscuit, went soft, almost shy, and he said, "Those are hard terms. They're the only ones I've got." "Good," he said. "I've spent 13 years with people who only ever told me what was easy." And he reached down and rested his hand on his sleeping son's dog, like a man making a promise on the only Bible he had left. "I'll come in the daylight, Frankie Bell, like any client, while the clinic's still yours." So here's where I am now, if you want to know. Biscuit's still going. That old runt has a couple of good years in him yet, trotting around on a $40 test and a daily pill, snoring in the sun, the last warm thing that knew a boy named Danny. And every day he's alive, I think, is a day a frozen man stays a little thawed. Bell Veterinary's still mine, still poor, still honest, still running on tamales and stubbornness. And the board complaint that was meant to end me died quietly because there was nothing real under it. I made sure of that on my own work, not his. And he comes around. In the daylight, the most dangerous man in the city sits in my waiting room on the mismatched chairs and waits his turn like any client, and talks to me like a man and not a legend, and he has not once tried to bankroll me, or shield me, or own me. He asks. He's slow at it, a closed man learning to be open late, and watching him be careful and humble and human with a big woman the whole city wrote off. That, it turns out, is the only kind of being seen I ever wanted. I won't tell you it's simple. He is what he is, and his world is what it is, and there are nights I lock the clinic and wonder what I've opened my door to. But I know this much. I spent my whole career being the vet who looks, who won't write off the old dog, or the poor client, or the runt nobody picks. And the one night it counted, the discount vet was the only one who looked hard enough to save a grieving father's last piece of his son. And then I had the harder courage, which was to refuse to let saving him cost me the honest, unbought self that made me able to save him in the first place. They laughed at the fat vet on the discount corner, and the fat vet was the only one who looked, and then the only one brave enough to stay her own woman, instead of becoming his. So if you were me, looked when no one else would, gave a frightening man back a piece of his child, set your terms, and watched the most dangerous man in the city actually try to meet them, would you let him in and open the door, or would you decide some men come with too much world attached and keep it shut? Tell me below. And if you've ever been the one they wrote off, the discount option, the one they assumed couldn't cut it because of how you look, hear the only thing I know for sure now. Being underestimated is not the same as being lesser. Sometimes it just means you're the only one willing to actually look, and one day what you see might give somebody back their whole world, maybe even your own. Before you go, if Frankie's story opened something in you tonight, there's a small way to keep that door open. On your YouTube app, there's a hype button right below this video. Tap it, pick your points, 3 free every week. And this story reaches someone who hasn't found us yet. It's like opening a door, small, quiet, and you never know who's been standing on the other side, waiting.